Thanks, Amy. Good morning, everyone. Thanks for joining us. My name is Maria Delgado. I'm a journalist with CLTtoday. We're a newsletter we just launched in Charlotte, and we talk about all the good, positive stories, development, businesses, how to be sustainable in the city and surrounding areas. And it is my honor to introduce this panel to you all. We're going to talk about how to conserve wildlife in your backyard. So starting closest to me, this is Alden Picard. He is with the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. He's a conservation coordinator. We have Caroline Burgett from Charlotte-Mecklenburg Stormwater Services and Kristin from the the Carolina Raptor Center. Guys, thank you so much for joining us. This is going to be a great conversation. We talked right before this, and honestly, they're inspiring. So I hope you're able to take away some notes that I would as well. So first of all, let's start with Alden, and then we'll move our way down. Alden, tell me about North Carolina Wildlife Federation, how you got started.
Yeah, so first of all, thanks y'all for being here. I was wondering if we would fill the room up for wildlife, and I see that we did, so fantastic. So yeah, I do work for the North Carolina Wildlife Federation. I've been there close to 10 months now. Time has flied, and like I've enjoyed every minute of it. So we are the only nonprofit in the state of North Carolina dedicated to the conservation of wildlife and habitat for all people. And what's really great about our organization is we do two things very well. We heavily influence policy at the state and federal level that impacts wildlife. And we also have a very large grassroots army of conservationists in our local communities that do all the great community-based habitat restoration work. Planting trees, installing bird boxes, bat boxes, removing invasive species, doing all the work that our local wildlife needs. And that's my job. The advocacy and the lobbying they do in Raleigh is great. My job is to work with the people in the community, all of our local volunteers, our community partners, the Raptor Center, Charlotte-Mecklenburg Stormwater, and just to get these projects done, work with them to provide educational opportunities. Sit here today to speak with people about wildlife and bring wildlife together. So I think we've been doing it since 1945, right, Kate? Kate is my colleague here with NCWF, and we're an affiliate of the National Wildlife Federation, so I might talk a little bit about that later. And that's in a nutshell what we do. 20 staff statewide, but we have a huge impact at the local level.
Caroline, what about you?
Absolutely. So I've been with Charlotte-Mecklenburg Stormwater Services for 11 years, and we are a local government collaboration between City of Charlotte, all the towns, and Mecklenburg County. So we have multiple programs from the infrastructure that drains our impervious surfaces to our creeks and our lakes. We have a water quality program, so if you report somebody dumping, somebody will respond the same day and investigate that. We look at the communities in our creeks, the bugs and fish that live in the creeks, and work to protect those. We have a huge flood mitigation program, so protecting citizens in these heavy rain events, looking at our creek crossings and flooding events, and removing risks from the floodplain.
And there's actually a new flood marker at Mallard Creek Greenway, correct?
Installed this week, yes. So up at Toby and Mallard, the intersection right by campus, main campus, there's a new art piece that was installed to kind of represent how wide and high the storm events get in the floodplains along the creeks streams.
Highly recommend if you haven't seen it yet. It's colorful, it's tall, it shows you where the water can go, and it was done in partnership with a local artist. So you said Toby and Mallard Creek?
Yeah, the intersection of Toby and Mallard Creek, right by campus. The piece of work is called Diver, and it's a
awesome, thank you. Kristin, what about you with Carolina Raptor Center?
I've been with Carolina Raptor Center for about 19 years now. So what we do, we really have two parts to our organization. We have a Raptor hospital, and that's where we receive 800 to 1,000 injured raptors per year. And our goal with all of those patients are helping them heal and releasing them back out in the wild. And then the other part is education to help, do what we can to inspire visitors to care about raptors, to then conserve them and their habitats. So we have about 65 permanent birds that are ambassadors for their species. So we have, we try to get people close to them so they can really appreciate them and start caring.
raptors are birds, not dinosaurs.
Yes.
Just wanted to clarify, but some of them are the oldest animals we've had on this planet, so it's, it counts for something, I guess. How did each of you get started, conserving, conservation work and just kind of living sustainably? What inspired you to get where you are today?
So for me, I was fortunate to be exposed at a very young age to the natural world in nature. I grew up with a very rich hardwood forest and Piedmont stream in my backyard that led to Falls Lake Reservoir in Lake County, which was dammed up by beavers. So I grew up just exploring and was encouraged by both my parents and had the access. So I realized like a privilege to be introduced to that at a young age and have access to that and then be encouraged to do that. Not all of us have that privilege. So I mean, I'm very blessed and fortunate. So I had a deep passion and connection to wildlife and nature from a very young age. And then, as I grew, became an adult, became a professional and went through school and education. At Warren Wilson College, I did my undergrad, which is in Asheville. It's a very much a service and stewardship, environmentally oriented college where you have to work to go to school, you have to do community service. So I developed a really strong sense of stewardship and giving back. And the way that I gave back was teaching third graders about the environment through a series of environmental education curriculums that we developed at Warren Wilson College called Eco Team. So I would get up at 6:15, take the car with some of my colleagues, other college students, and we'd go to third grade classrooms in Buncombe County and teach predator-prey relations, watershed, pollination, and at that point I realized I had something to give back and that, I could try my best to connect folks and give them access to what I had when I was young. And then after that, I volunteered here locally in Charlotte with the Charlotte Wildlife Stewards. I have a couple volunteers in the back. If you want to raise your hand. So kudos to these guys. So I joined the local chapter, and volunteered for about 3 years. And at that point, a position was open with the North Carolina Wildlife Federation, and then it was a natural fit for me. So here I am at the next level,
Yeah.
trying to have an impact.
Actually living your passion, because I don't know many college students that wanted to get up at 6:15 every morning.
I didn't know that I did either, and I didn't want to all the time. But
it
yeah,
happened and you're here.
yeah.
Thank you, Caroline, what led you to get to stormwater services?
Absolutely. So I think it's a very similar story to Alden, except I grew up here in Charlotte and I had a stream in my backyard. So I was playing in the stream, flipping over rocks, for snakes, crayfish, all that, the same as Alden. And then just my education, I did go to NC State. I thought I was going to be a zookeeper, but I graduated right around 2010. There wasn't very many opportunities available. So I ended up going to Mississippi State and looking at the fisheries down there in lakes and rivers, and realized that we can make a bigger impact locally around our resources. And so I came back to Charlotte and I was excited to work for Stormwater and really respond to a lot of those pollution issues and monitoring the streams for the temperature and pH and learning about everything that was right here in our backyard. So it's definitely been a journey through my education and my career, and I just absolutely love all my colleagues and working with the public here to make a difference.
Thank you.
Yeah, so similar. I grew up, camping with my family. I'd always been drawn to animals, and as I got older, just knowing I wanted to do something and not knowing really what. I was majoring in environmental studies, and was just kind of exploring the field to see what was out there, and I got an internship at Carolina Raptor Center, and I had never necessarily been super interested in birds. I like mammals probably a little bit more, and I did that and I was hooked. I knew I wanted to somehow give back, and it just seemed like a perfect fit for me to do that and also work with animals.
So bringing us to the topic, animals, wildlife. When we're talking about Charlotte, what's native to this area that we can expect to kind of help along the way and help conserve as we move forward in this world, in the city that keeps developing?
So I'll start us off here, but I know that you guys will both have much to elaborate. So Charlotte wildlife, native wildlife, Mecklenburg County. We have to start with the most diverse group of wildlife, which are the invertebrates. And of the invertebrates, it's the insects that rule the world. So there's over at least 10,000 species of insects native to North Carolina. It's impossible to tell how many are in Mecklenburg County. Many probably haven't been discovered, but Department of Agriculture in 1938 in a publication says at least over 10,000 described species of insects in North Carolina. And a lot of those, of course, live in Mecklenburg County. And so the native insects and then the native plants that those insects rely on, those are the two most diverse groups. I think in North Carolina, there's nearly 4,000 native plant species, and I include plants in wildlife because they are wildlife.
Yeah.
It's not just animals, it's the fungi, the bacteria, but we won't go into all that stuff. So those insects and those native plants form the foundation of our food webs here on land, our terrestrial food webs. And then to go into some of the other groups, the birds. So, and I know Kristin will talk more about this, but Mecklenburg County compiled and completed a breeding bird atlas. It was the first county level breeding bird atlas. It was a partnership with Mecklenburg County Parks and Rec, Mecklenburg County Audubon, and from 2011 to 2015, they inventoried all the breeding birds in Mecklenburg County, all the birds, but they included the breeding birds. So there have been 312 species of birds recorded in Mecklenburg County. Some may have been very rare. Of those 312, we have 116 known breeding birds here in Mecklenburg County.
That's a lot of birds.
That is fantastic, and that'll come into play when we talk more about native plants. Amphibians, reptiles, we have around 27 species of amphibians, so that's frogs, toads, salamanders. Davidson College has the Carolina Herp Atlas, so the Carolina Herpetology Atlas. So they've been logging species across the state, and in Mecklenburg County, there's about 27 amphibians that have been recorded, 24 species of snakes, 9 species of turtles, 7 species of lizards, and then North Carolina alone, we have 120 mammals around, give or take, and you guys probably see a lot of them in your backyard. And I'll let these guys elaborate, but that's kind of where we'll start. I left off some groups, right? Fish, you can't include them all, but that's where we'll start.
But it's certainly a lot.
Yeah.
And then, so going from, plants, insects, and then moving kind of up in the world, we have our avians as well. It's a lot.
So, when you think about how many injured birds we see, it seems like a lot, but to me, it really says like they are common in this area. Like they are getting in trouble, a lot of times human-related injuries. But that means that we have a lot of raptors. Barred owls and red-shouldered hawks, red-tailed hawks are our most common species that we have. They do really well in neighborhoods. A lot of the raptor species that we have adapted really well. Luckily, there's a lot of areas, even uptown Charlotte, that have old growth trees, and that's so important. So, when we're thinking about backyards, preserving that kind of thing is critical for those birds.
So speaking of our backyard, these birds, these insects, these plants, what exactly are we talking about? Because not everyone in Charlotte has a house, a backyard, a front yard. There's a lot of apartments, as you can see, many cranes all around the city and surrounding area. What are we talking about exactly when we say backyard?
To me, I see it as, any space, outdoor space that you can, connect with. But it could be if you have a balcony, you can still do things with the balcony. But I think it's like the local area and like what you can do, what you can encourage neighbors to do, and make these areas as beneficial as possible for our wildlife.
And branching out, we still have our creeks, our storm systems, our greenways as well. Caroline, how many greenways, how many streams, creeks do we have in Mecklenburg County alone?
Absolutely. So I would include all these public spaces as all of our backyards, right? Where we go with our kids after dinner, go for a walk on the weekends, pick a ball around. So we've got over 50 miles of greenways and trails in the ground right now. That's rapidly growing. 3,000 miles of creeks and streams. So you may have a creek in your backyard. You're definitely going to drive over one on your way to work. So these spaces are the public spaces, and they're your backyard as well.
So starting with our immediate backyard, what are some things we can do to keep our wildlife healthy, thriving, and sustainable for years to come? Starting small and kind of branching out if we can. Alden, we'll start with you.
Sure, yeah, and just back to the backyard, that's also a little bit of a misnomer. It should just be, so backyard, we don't want to limit wildlife and conservation to our backyard hidden from everyone, right? We want it everywhere, in our front yard, our side yard, everywhere that we live, that we work, that we play, that we eat, that we sleep, our places of business. These are the places that we want to actively work to conserve and restore wildlife. Which is by introducing our native plant communities. So let's make sure that it's going to be everywhere. We can't continue to limit conservation to national parks and forests and these giant preserves and game lands that have been put aside. Those are fantastic pieces of land and have great value for conservation, but we've still been losing species regardless of that strategy. We still continue to lose species every day. In North Carolina, there's 500 species listed by the state as species of greatest conservation need. I mean, species that used to be common, like whippoorwills and chimney swifts and some of our salamanders and meadowlarks and box turtles. A lot of their populations are rapidly declining. So now it's all of our turn to jump in and do this where we work, live, eat, and play.
Absolutely. So starting small with our balconies, with our immediate space, what are some steps we can take to kind of start now to preserve this wildlife that we may be losing in the future?
So step number one is remove the invasive plants on your property. Okay. Seriously, these are introduced non-natives that reduce the function of even our local ecosystems. So essentially, non-native plants don't provide any food for our native insects. Our native insects, so the plants are the base of the food web, right? They take the energy from the sun and convert it to food that consumers, animals can eat. If you can't directly eat plants, then you're going to rely on eating something that can eat those plants to get those nutrients. So the insect eats the plant, and the bird eats the insect. Or the insect eats the insect that eats the plant. Or the fish eats the insect that eats the insect that eats the plant. So these non-native introduced species that have become invasive cause harm to our environments, even human health and the economy. So you can't have wildlife with invasive plants. So step one is removing those invasives, and we actually work with Stormwater all the time to help clear some of the invasives off of their properties. So in my book, that's step one.
Yeah, absolutely. And those invasive, not only above the ground are really impactful, but below the ground, the roots are very shallow normally, or they're binding species, so they don't hold the soil in as well. They don't amend the soil to be more receptive to infiltrating rainfall. So that's where Stormwater is definitely partnering with volunteers and nonprofits to tackle the invasive problem. I would say do an audit of your property and try to limit, we're trying to slow and spread the rainfall and the water and not let it leave our property, right? Because then it's gonna have downstream effects. So if you're gonna plant a tree or you're gonna plant native plants, do an audit and be very strategic of where you're gonna put that, where it may be covering some impervious hard surfaces to kind of slow the water from hitting that. It can absorb those nutrients and runoff in the water and allow it to infiltrate better. So that would be my perspective, is to add vegetation to your landscape and to reduce impervious.
And through my lens, I think about all the types of injuries we see and how we can prevent some of those injuries to our wildlife. So simple things like just keeping litter inside your car until you get to a trash can. Any kind of litter along the roadsides just creates an area for mice to come along the road, and a lot of times raptors can be hunting right along the roadsides. Even biodegradable things like banana peels that attracts rodents. So a lot of times they are not looking both ways before they cross. So things like that can make a big difference. And even like in the springtime, when you are pruning, trees or shrubs, doing a really good inspection first, because that, a lot of times that coincides with, baby bird season. So kind of March through, midsummer is a time where they are using dead trees, hollows in trees. And hollows, are so important for like cavity nesters. And that's a lot of times where a branch has broken off. So a lot of times automatically you want to trim that. So just being really mindful of that. Even things like not using rodenticide, snap traps are a lot better, because rodenticide, that can make those rodents very sick, but they don't die right away. So that is the perfect prey for raptors. They're looking for, prey items that are weaker and in that shape. So that just goes up that food chain. What else? And then, things like not cutting fishing line. If you're fishing, enjoying nature in that way, making sure that you're, removing everything that you bring in. And if you do hook a bird, it's best you cannot just cut the line, because that can cause a lot of problems.
So with the rodenticides, with the lines, we're kind of expanding past our immediate backyard and going to the streams, waterways. You touched on litter as well. That can happen a lot to our streams all around the city. Like I've gone to greenways, and I have seen, plastic bottles, fishing line, plastic bags just left. Of course I pick them up, but not everyone does. So what do you recommend are some things you can do to kind of keep that healthy? Because at the end of the day, that's kind of our drinking water and the water that our animals, our wildlife need to sustain their own lives.
Yes, absolutely. So all of our runoff in our watersheds is going to go downstream to a point. And most of our streams are impaired for the aquatic life in them, the bugs and the fish that live and require that water. And that's two factors primarily, right? So that's water quality. So what's the quality of the water that they're living in? We have a lot of sediment issues, obviously with new construction. We've seen the orange water runoff, but also established parcels have erosion problems as well. So we're really addressing those erosion problems, native plants, stabilizing that soil, and letting it infiltrate as it's amended with compost and native plants. Water quality is also affected by bacteria. So our dog waste, we've got sanitary sewers that run alongside of our creeks. So if we're flushing wipes, which are not flushable, or putting grease down our drains, eventually that's going to cause a clog downstream. Those sewers then overflow and introduce bacteria into our creeks. Heavy metals, everything that's on the surface, oils, all that's going to run downstream and impair the water quality of our streams. The second main factor why they're impaired is the habitat, and that is primarily due to the quantity of water that's running off of our hard surfaces. So all of our downspouts, all of our paved surfaces, but even mowed grass doesn't really have the infiltration that leaving the leaves to amend the soil with just natural decomposition, just adding that leaf layer, adding the tree canopy to kind of intercept some of that water before it gets to the ground. All of that runoff is then going downstream at a rapid rate because we pipe it, and the volume of it is just it's just shooting it down the stream, and it can't keep up. It's staying in this channel. It eats out the banks. It can't get out on the floodplain where it can slow and spread among the vegetation that's out on the floodplain. So those are the two reasons that why the streams are impaired. And so to fix that, Stormwater Services is doing stream restoration to kind of repair the creeks in their state, but it all starts upstream with what we're putting on the landscape and how we're managing our properties to hold and slow that waterfall before and clean the water before it can get to the stream system.
So one thing you mentioned, I know and we talked about this before this panel, when we're mowing our lawn, and people want to clean the clippings that are on the lawn because aesthetically it looks nice, right? But we're not doing our environment any favors when we do that, right?
And absolutely, and the application of all of the herbicides and the pesticides to get the real nice green grass in the lawns, all that adds up. It doesn't stay there, it goes downstream. And so kind of creating wildlife habitats in your backyard, I'll turn to Alden.
Well, you said the L word, and I was like, oh, boy, let's talk about lawn here. I mean, a lot of us have lawns. Lawns have a place. I mean, I'm not telling, no one's going to tell you to get rid of all your lawn, but next to removing your invasive species and planting native plants is reducing your lawn. In many cases, you can consider your lawn an invasive species. It's a biological desert, right? Mowing your lawn compacts the soil. I think there's 40 million acres of lawn in the United States. If we reduce that in half, that'd be 20 million acres that we could restore our natural and native plant communities in. Not to mention the gas and the exhaust. But yeah, your lawns are essentially impervious because it's just compacted soil. And, we don't have native grasses in the southeast that do well with all the trampling and stuff. So, but just reduce your lawn. Reduce your lawn to just little paths through your yard around your native beds. And then to add to the runoff, capture that runoff. Whether direct your downspout into a rain garden or install a rain cistern, because as the climate is changing, we get increased heavy rain events and then longer periods of drought. And during those long periods of droughts, if you've already caught all that heavy rain, rather than it running off through your driveway, picking up the pollutants, going into our creeks, causing erosion, you have that as a water resource at your house, which can be very valuable. So yeah, reduce your lawns. It's challenging. I mean, I'm working on it right now. It's not easy.
Well, and just keeping your lawn like at a healthy height, you're keeping our pollinators alive, you're keeping birds alive. I mean, Kristin, you were working on something for your lawn as well as we were planning this.
So I started getting interested. I had just like a bird bath. That one broke, and then I had just like a really tiny little dish, like the dishes that go under potted plants to catch the water. And I put that out on my in my yard, and birds just immediately started using it. And just watching how many birds were using that tiny little bird bath, I'm now working on a pond. And very excited about attracting like dragonflies and frogs and so many things. And right now it's just kind of a hole and there's a little bit of water in it and they're already using it. And it's just like, oh my gosh, they're desperate for this. So after this today, I'm probably gonna go home and keep digging.
Yeah, kind of creating like beds around your lawn, and you've got a buffer now for a lot of species like that edge habitat, and then you can kind of work on shrinking that down year by year. It's not an all at once thing. It's like build something now and kind of expand it and grow it and kind of see what pops up natively. Like, so I just stopped mowing my backyard, and after about 3 or 4 or 5 years, there's invasives that come up, you pluck them, but there's native wildflowers that are coming up just by doing nothing. It's pretty interesting.
And I want to reiterate, you don't have to have your lawn, your yard look bad while this is happening. Like you can still maintain healthily, right?
Yeah, I think like having the border, like some kind of edging can make, it look more intentional for like HOAs. I recommend fighting your HOAs. We have to like change this culture somehow of not, being able to have native plants and native, wildflowers. It's a big problem.
I want to go back to runoff and impervious. I'm suddenly blanking on the word, but impervious surfaces. There we go. Came to me. For example, washing our cars in our driveways or on the street, and all of those chemicals kind of going into our waterways, and then our waterways becoming kind of polluted with that, and then making its way through our wildlife. What can we do today or tomorrow? The weather's nice. We have to wash our cars somehow, right? What can we start doing to kind of keep our waterways clean, to keep our animals healthy?
Yeah, so definitely recommend, if you can, you have the ability to go to a car wash facility. All that water is captured and goes to our wastewater treatment systems. The next best thing would be to wash it on a grassed surface, so all that water is just kind of collecting in your lawn and letting it soak down and kind of clean as it goes. But also doing that audit of where on your property, does your driveway slope down to the street, or in my property, my driveway slopes back down towards my house and towards a grass area where I could add native plants that will soak up some of those things. And then keeping your cars well maintained. So our brakes they're full of heavy metals like copper and all of that. Every time we brake, that brake dust is getting on the street. So keeping them well maintained, keeping our tires well maintained. And then obviously any sort of drips or leaks that you see. And then if you do see, like commercial, parties that are doing quote unquote the wrong thing, maybe they're dumping buckets of wastewater straight into a catch basin, or you see or smell something funky like oil in the stream, call 311. We have people on staff 24/7 to respond to emergencies. So just stopping and looking and observing around you, and spreading the message of what we can do to help.
And then I could just add one other thing. We're talking about conserving and building wildlife habitats in our backyard, and the applications of pesticides and mosquito sprays, that's kind of futile to the efforts. So those also run off your lawn, and they run into our streams and our creeks. So we really need to be reducing the use of these herbicides and pesticides and fertilizers. And aside from woody invasive species, and there are smart and sustainable ways to use herbicides to control the invasives on your property. Don't get out there before it's gonna rain and spray your glyphosate. Target treat these woody invasives, cut them down, brush the stumps, but do it, according to how you should. But we really should be reducing the use of these chemicals.
Even something like ant killer, we're seeing that in our waterways too. So maybe you just use like boiling water to get on an ant pile, but using a reputable company and looking at the label, reading the label, and trying to minimize the use of all these chemicals, from the rodenticides to the herbicides, pesticides, all across.
What are some of those chemicals that we need to be looking out for if we're buying certain things in the stores?
I mean, all of them.
All of them.
They're natural, they're in
They're
that
not really
concentration,
natural.
in that concentration.
Organic
Yeah.
things can kill you too.
Yeah.
There's plenty of deadly organics.
So we talked about removing invasive species. You talked about kind of keeping an eye on these chemicals, creating bird baths, creating natural lawns and, backyards in a sense. What are, would you say, like 3 easy things anyone can do starting today to keep our wildlife healthy?
Volunteering. So with Alden, with the county, Park and Rec, I'm sure you guys have volunteer opportunities too. So Park and Rec and Stormwater Services, we have litter cleanups monthly, weekly, to get involved in not just public spaces, but private spaces too. We've got tree planting events, we've got building birdhouses. So there's volunteer opportunities all across the city. That's one easy thing.
I think just going outside and enjoying nature. I think birds are so easy to fall in love with because they're everywhere. It's really about just looking around, looking up, and having a real appreciation for them. Getting interested, learning more about them is going to inspire you to make changes in your everyday life.
Yeah, and just to add on, these are all important things. Getting outside and observing your wildlife, that's the only way to connect with it and to truly care. But some tangible steps you could do when you get home is your floodlights, your security lights. If you don't have them on motion sensors already, get motion sensor lights, and make sure they're yellow lights. Those lights we leave around our house all night, it's not good for a lot of our moths and our insects, which are the foundation of our free bush. So you can change your lights. We talked a lot. Reduce your lawn. Talk to your neighbor. Put up a sign. Show intention with what you're doing around your property. That way you don't have your neighbors call code enforcement. We could probably get in some conversations with that. Get out there and learn, and come volunteer. I think that's super important.
Now, for some of us, it may not have a yard, but we have a balcony, as Kristin mentioned. What are some things we can do in that sense? So, like, if we don't really have like an immediate green space, what can we do?
Potted plants are great. That can attract pollinators to balconies. I think we think about windows and is that a target for birds? There's simple things you can put decals to avoid window collisions. Is that really important? And just turning lights off, like Alden was saying, at night, even in office spaces, that can really affect migratory birds. So that's a simple thing that we can all do at night.
Yeah, and if all you have is a balcony, I started on a balcony in Pleasant Midwood, it was a sunny balcony, but I had a pollinator container garden. And I watched the bees and the insects come to it. You can make a difference, one person. And then when we all are our own persons installing these native plants, and there are like some really powerhouse native plants, goldenrods, asters, oaks, willows, you can look into these that support more wildlife than 90% of the rest of invasives, but planting these wherever you can, all of us together can have a huge impact. And that, to quote Doug Talamy, that's what Homegrown National Park is. It's all of us creating these spaces. And that is really the sentiment of the Butterfly Highway, which is a program of the North Carolina Federation, Wildlife Federation. It's everybody doing what they can in their space, whether it's a community garden, their balcony, their front yard, backyard, just having that. We're gluing these fragments of habitat together by adding these native plants to the spaces that we can.
I think you touched on this, Maria, picking up litter as you go. So, you know, you didn't put it there, obviously, but as you're walking to your car, you see a bottle. If you're walking into the store and you see something, I mean, if you don't pick it up, probably nobody else is going to pick it up, and it's going to wash downstream into our waters, or it's going to attract the rodents for the birds. Pick up that litter.
Why is it so important that we need to conserve our wildlife? I feel like a lot of humankind can be kind of selfish in a way and not think about the impact that would have on our daily lives. But really, like, we're all connected in some form, right? Why is it so important that we do take these actions to make sure we're having a healthier ecosystem?
Like, just to go start, like we share the space with our wildlife. We are part of it just as much as they are, and I think it's just intrinsically important to be able to keep a healthy ecosystem, and it's also makes it healthier for us.
A lot of this wildlife provides ecosystem services to us. So our decomposers that are kind of cleaning up all the dead detritus and dead animals that are around. In our waterways, we have native mussels that are filtering the water for downstream. Somebody else is going to drink it. So they provide a service to us, not just for our well-being and our mental health, but also just to keep the environment clean and sustainable.
Vultures also are helping us a lot by taking care of all that carry-on.
Personally, vultures freak me out a little bit. Their faces. It's really their faces, but they're good for us,
They're
right?
so great. Yes, they are nature's cleanup crew. They're doing a huge service. They keep all sorts of diseases down. They can adjust that and remove it from the system, the environment altogether. So yeah, huge. They're also, once you get to know them, very charismatic, very smart. They're at Carolina Raptor Center. I think it's like all of our favorite birds are vultures.
I love that you call them nature's cleanup crew
Yeah.
personally, because now I'm picturing one with like an orange vest.
Yes.
And like, trying to clean up. Alden, what about you?
Yeah, I'll just say, I mean, they hit it, like, they're right. I mean, at its most fundamental, healthy wildlife populations, healthy plant communities, provide the function and services that we rely on to survive. Clean water, clean air, food, pollination. So we seem to have separated ourselves from, and humans are good at that, from the natural environment and from wildlife. It's time to become part of it again, because without these, and again, I'm going back to the insects and the plants that are the base of our food webs. Without insects, you don't have plants. So without plants, you don't have insects. There's no food, this is an insect world. Let's give the insects a fighting chance. That's what I'll say. And we'll do just fine.
So with taking out invasive plants or kind of living with the wildlife, are there things we can do to kind of feed them and help them along the way, besides adding plants that might be good for them? Like, are there foods we can give them, maybe that we also eat, or what can we do for them? Or bird feeders, for example.
You want to touch on bird feeders?
Well, maybe you should.
Well, so I will, and I couldn't reiterate this more. Native plants are the most important food source. So they are the host. They attract the insects, and I'll just use birds as an example. 95 to 100% of all birds rely on soft-bodied insects to raise their young. Even cardinals, like even finches that you think of as seed or fruit eaters, they need caterpillars, which are mostly the larvae of moths and butterflies. They are a nutritional powerhouse. So a chickadee could feed this is from Doug Talby's research. A chickadee could feed a baby bird one medium-sized caterpillar or 90 or 100 aphids. So it's much easier for birds to breed when they have the right food source. So, and I think he's done some really great research on this. Doug Talmy, I encourage y'all to check him out if you haven't already. For a chickadee to raise one single brood, a handful of babies, they need around 6,000 to 9,000 caterpillars. And that's just when they're feeding them those 14 days in the nest. Once they fledge, mom and dad still feed them for a couple weeks. And you can watch this in your backyard, which again, why it's so important to get out in your backyard. You can watch the adults still come to feed the fledglings. So you don't have the birds without the native plants. And it is those caterpillars that are the best at converting that plant energy to protein and fats for all of our animals and wildlife that are consumers. And then berries from our native plants. Butterfly bush, a lot of folks think, oh, I planted a butterfly bush, right?
I'm good.
Yeah, I'm good. That is like the junk food for wildlife. It doesn't have the nutritional value that our native nectar sources do. The berries from our Asian ornamentals are super low in fat. So all these fall berries from Asian ornamentals are super low in fat. But if that's all the food that our birds have, that might be what they eat when they should be eating our holly berries, our viburnum berries, our dogwood berries, that they've evolved to eat, that has that nutrition to get them through their migrations and through the winter. And you can supplement with bird feeders. Just you need to be responsible and make sure you're doing it correct. Black oil sunflower is great. You don't want the mess, you can get it shelled. Thistle, safflower, suet, you can feed fruit and stuff. Just keep in mind the hygiene and safety of the birds, right, Kristin?
Yeah, definitely, and placing them, in the right place, so there is I don't remember right now the distance, of a window, so they're not colliding with the window and thinking that the trees, that the reflection that they see keeps going. But it is a really great way to really see the birds and get excited about them. But again, it's really important to have the native plants to support them, year round.
If you don't have space to add native plants, just not mowing or raking up your leaves in the fall, kind of using that leaf material as your mulch material. A lot of these insects will overwinter in those nooks and crannies. It also holds back little pockets of water so the birds can come and drink after a rainstorm. So if you don't have the opportunity to add, just looking at what you're having and reducing, cleaning up that material in the winter time can also support these communities too.
And kind of going off of that, in the spring, trying to wait as long as you can to let that grass grow, because you'll have pollinators and animals still kind of nesting and feeding. So kind of waiting a little longer than you may normally to mow would also be good, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, and if you can keep your mow height, this is really hard, but to over 3 inches, it's better for everything wildlife. Like you can mow over a box turtle or over a bunny nest if you just keep your mowing height up a little bit more.
The height of your grass usually corresponds to the roots as well, so you get shorter roots and they're not as able to hold that soil in place or to absorb the water as well. So switching over to blends that are a little bit higher or adding some clover into your mix to help the root system.
So we've got about 15 minutes left. I want to leave some time for Q&A. So 2 more questions and then we'll open up the floor. What resources can we find, or where can we go to find these resources to help us conserve our wildlife, small and large?
Just I'll be quick. The North Carolina Wildlife Federation has many resources on our website. Just peruse on there and you'll find resources for the Butterfly Highway, resources for Garden for Wildlife, lots of links to native plants, nurseries, strategies for creating habitat. Also the National Wildlife Federation, their Garden for Wildlife. They have a native plant finder, which is fantastic. And it can help you find the native plants that provide the most impact here in Mecklenburg County. And then the NC State Extension has some fantastic resources and publications that are free. Butterflies in Your Backyard is fantastic. You can get it online. we have a bunch at our office. I'm happy to give you a printed one. Send me an email, get it to you. Yeah, just get online and have fun looking around.
Absolutely, get on their listserv. They send weekly emails that cover a wide range of opportunities and just educational. I get 1 or 2 emails a week from you guys that are always great. We've got the Soil and Water Conservation District here in Mecklenburg County. They provide funding, grant funding, 75% match if you want to implement a rain garden or stream bank stabilization. You can find their website through the stormwater.charmec.org. They're a partner with us, as well as Park and Rec has some opportunities for volunteering in our open spaces, parkandrec.com or mecnc.gov. You can find those online as well.
And I want to reiterate the county and Parks and Rec, they do basically weekly cleanups in our streams and parks. And it's so easy to use their website, go online and find ways to get in the community, even if it's only for an hour, 2 hours, and really clean the butterfly highways, the parks, the streams, the creeks, the greenways, to keep our backyards healthy and thriving.
They also do bird walks, moth night, just
Yeah.
different educational opportunities for youth all the way up to your seniors. So it's not just giving back, but also learning as well.
Exactly. Good stuff.
And yeah, check out Carolina Raptor Center, you can visit, but we have a lot of educational opportunities. And if you're interested in learning more about birds, I think All About Birds, the Cornell website is a really great place to get started. And then like UNC Charlotte, they have a really great plant sale that has lots of native plants, and it's very easy to, pick which ones, and there's just so helpful to know how you can like really incorporate those into your garden.
And their plant sales at their botanical garden, so if you haven't been, it's gorgeous.
It's really
So
fun.
definitely, yeah, definitely take some time there. Daniel Stowe Botanical Garden also has like walks to kind of photograph wildlife, take a look around. But there are definitely different ways to get into the community and really start making a difference, even if it's for an hour a day or an hour a week. My final question for our panelists: can we truly conserve wildlife in our backyard?
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, I know we can. So I was just out in the yard yesterday evening, removing some invasive species, some ivy, English ivy, among others. And I just so happened to notice this little native cavity nesting bee using a dogwood snag. I had a dogwood die in my backyard. I didn't cut it flush to the ground. I left about 10 feet up. And now this native bee is using it to lay eggs and for cover. And imagine if everyone here left one snag or left some logs in their yard. So all that to say is the animals are still there. We haven't lost them all yet. Now is the time. We can actually do it. And just after that, I looked down and there was a firefly on a blade of grass in my yard. So they are there, and I think y'all seen Field of Dreams. If you build it, they will come. So this is anecdotal, right? But it can happen, and if we all do it, we'll be better for it.
I think so. It's a learning experience. We're not going to get it right away, but as we learn and make mistakes and learn from our mistakes, we're going to do better. And if we're all in this together and we're connecting our patches beside us and then talking to our neighbors and then our neighbors, and then the county bought this parcel of land over here, and now we have a corridor and we can get these populations really thriving.
I say don't get discouraged. It might seem overwhelming if you're just getting started, but every small step you take, like it snowballs. Like it will, a couple years down the road, you're going to see the impact of all those small steps that you've made. And really just trying to commit to like 1 or 2 things, not everything at once, and that will make a huge difference.
Fantastic. All right, so I believe we have about 10 minutes left, ready for questions. I saw one hand up over here.
So I know you mentioned that birds feed on caterpillars, specifically like, I guess, moth caterpillars. I have seen like a shortage in like the little instruments.
Yeah.
Do the birds eat those, and is the shortage due to something caused by the environment, or is it something that we need to fix?
That's a good question. You're probably talking about cankerworms. It's a wingless moth larvae. and willow oak trees. You see those bands around our willow oak trees across the city? Those are like sticky bands to keep the moths from getting up to the leaves to lay their eggs. And as with any animal, the population fluctuates, right, in cycles. But once the population gets too low, it can't handle those natural fluctuations. So yes, they eat the inchworms, and yeah, those populations do fluctuate. And I would encourage folks not to use the sticky bands on your trees. While some of these native caterpillars can defoliate a lot of your trees, a healthy tree can survive these types of damage from insects. And we should welcome some of this damage in our yard. It's okay if there's critters eating your plants, because that means there's food in your yard for wildlife. So does that answer your question?
Sorry. I don't know what it has to do with invertebrates. So I'm a huge advocate for crustaceans and the help that crustaceans provide to the environment. There is a blue crab shortage, and also crabs major ecosystem services. Is there anything that we can do to protect them, like in the salt marshes and
Absolutely. So the sediment input here is going to eventually reach downstream. So slowing and spreading that water allows that sediment and allows all the nutrients that it's carrying down to the estuaries to infiltrate our groundwater, and it cleans it and it provides ecosystem services downstream as well. So it's all about slowing, letting that water infiltrate onto the landscape before it hits our rivers and streams, which carries it down to the estuaries.
And just one more point, and what's causing the most damage to our blue crab population and our fisheries is our inshore trawling. North Carolina is the only state on the East Coast that still allows trawling, which is heavy equipment dragged across the bottom to catch shrimp. It catches for every pound of shrimp, there's 4 pounds of bycatch that's killed. And the seagrass beds and the habitats are destroyed. So if you want to join our cause and save our sounds, that is some of the work that we're doing right now with the Wildlife Federation.
I saw a hand up here, back here first, and we'll move our way forward. Yes.
So I know that you have mentioned, feeling of being overwhelmed with knowing what to do. And so that's kind of how I feel with my backyard, is knowing what to plant where. And so I was wondering if you or any of the organizations offer free or low cost backyard.
I'm not sure.
We don't offer the backyard auditing services, but we do have workshops to kind of learn more about it. So Creek Week, we usually have a live staking workshop, which is where we'll go out and we'll identify native plants that you can propagate simply by taking clippings and sticking them in the soil, and they'll root and you'll have a new plant. And so we teach community members that want to come to that workshop, we teach them what plants we're selecting, and then we go ahead and show you how to install them on a creek bank. But you don't necessarily have to install them on a creek bank. You can put them in a pot of soil and then you'll have them for your yard. So we do teach that, as well as I like to host some rain garden work days. So we have those throughout the year. The city of Charlotte also has that through landscape management. So you can kind of learn what plants are doing well in the beds, the urban beds that we have. And usually we let you dig up plants and take them home too, because they spread so rapidly. So those are great ways to kind of get your hands dirty and to learn. But as far as actually coming to your yard, we don't offer that service right now.
No, a lot of our chapters, the North Carolina Wildlife Federation chapters, our local chapters are the Charlotte Wildlife Stewards, as you know, Tracy, Habitat and Wildlife Keepers, and Matthews, Concord Wildlife Alliance. If you get online, and we'll see you at the table later, but sign up for the newsletters. We do offer lots of educational programs, webinars that can help with this. I will plug the Mecklenburg County Extension Master Gardener Volunteers. That is a great resource. So please reach out to them too.
No, I would also like to chime in too. When we bought our first house, our backyard was a mess. It still is a mess, but we're starting small and looking at what our grow zone is. So going online and seeing a map of the different grow zones in the country, and then just honing into Mecklenburg County and really seeing what can thrive in the area, what will grow best. I think that's a good place to start. And also, you mentioned there is a way to see the native species online. So definitely seeing what's needed to the area and kind of starting small. I saw a hand back here, yes.
I'm curious to know, I'm on an HOA committee in our development. We want to learn how to live with the beavers in our waterways and creeks. Do you know of any programs locally that can help us? Because we can't find them.
So what we recommend, kind of the human wildlife interaction with beavers is definitely to wrap the trees, with a wire mesh, and you kind of have to go pretty high on the trees.
Actually, we are
do that.
looking into items like beaver bafflers and fence and leveler, and we're having a really hard time. We had to go out of state to get information on that. And we just wanted to know, is there anything in Charlotte, Mecklenburg, the state, that can help suburban areas live with the beavers in our communities, because they're very important.
Absolutely, yeah. So reaching out to 311 will connect you to some stormwater folks that can come out and meet you on site and kind of discuss some of the different methods that have worked locally. So we can do, each site is very unique on what you can or can't implement just based on the topography, adjacent properties and things like that. So I'd say 311 should get you to somebody within stormwater services who can help with that.
So you guys talked a little bit about the insecticides and pesticides. It's kind of mosquito season right now. Is there any way to like sustainably kind of manage their population? Maybe like that, to reduce the use of insecticides.
Yeah, I'll just say real quickly, if you have a healthy plant community and a healthy wildlife population, you have the mosquito predators, the bats, the birds, the dragonflies. Also, there are mosquito dunks, which use a natural bacteria, some sort of BT. But essentially you fill up a 5-gallon bucket of water and the mosquitoes come, they lay their eggs, you throw in the little dunk, and it releases the bacteria and they take care of the larvae. Yeah.
Auditing your property for litter, that's where a lot of that water will collect, and it doesn't evaporate quickly enough. And so like chip bags or a bottle or something like that, that's where a lot of the biting mosquito will populate, as well as any sort of just cups or old planters, clogged gutters. So a lot of it is kind of the anthropogenic effects of what we do to the landscape that's holding back these little pockets of water. That's where the biting mosquitoes are going to be.
Also, don't be afraid to have mosquito spray right outside your front door. I mean, I use it whenever I go outside and put a spray in my yard. Spray myself. And usually I notice the mosquitoes love me. I notice they tend to attack my ankles. So I'll just spray my knees down and I tend to be just fine.
Well, we've got time for one more question. I saw a hand back here.
Are you sure?
You can always come up to us after this.
Yeah.
So I'm feeling like a lot of urgency around this whole subject. We live in Northwest Charlotte, and I'm sure this is true for other parts of town. But in the past couple of years, the green that used to be there is just getting completely leveled. Apartments and townhouses, housing developments. And it's just heartbreaking. And our neighbors have 7 acres, 4 of which are wooded, and now they're talking about selling it. So what I'd love to hear from any and all of you is highest priority to, like, what are you can tell us 1 or 2 key things to make sure we do in our yards that we can control that will support our habitat and ecosystem and wildlife populations. What would be like if we do nothing else? It's
So like a bullet point. Invasive plants, kind of monitor
Yeah,
those.
I hate that you have to start with there. You
Yeah.
shouldn't have to start with removing invasive plants. But you can't have native plants if your property is overrun with invasives. It's so important for wildlife. And then water. Some sort of water source, whether you get maintain a bird bath or you install, like Kristin is, some sort of pond, or even if they hear like moving water signals fresh water. And if you like birds, and you have some fresh dripper or something moving water, you're gonna see some really cool birds.
So there's solar fountains now that I was looking, they're so affordable, it can be like $20 for a bird bath, that'll attract birds, so it's a really great way to do it, it's easy, you don't have electricity to outside.
I would say plant a native tree and keep the native trees on your properties. I think all my adjoining property owners have taken down mature oaks because they wanted more lawn or whatever their reasons may be, but replace your invasive Bradford pear with a native American fringe tree, or just leaving those trees in place.
And also just be aware of what is a native invasive and what is a non-native invasive. Like we have violets all over our yard. They actually are native and they provide a fairly decent habitat for wildlife. And they compete with those non-native invasive plants too. So dandelions are great pollinator source. So just educate yourself on the types of plants that are in your yard and know what to remove and what.
That's awesome. The apps on our phone are great now. Just take a picture and
Yeah.
press the button and it pops up with some species recommendations. Their AI is really getting really great.
Well, I want to thank all of you for joining this panel. I want to thank our panelists for their expertise on the subject of conserving wildlife in our backyard. Thank you so much. Feel free to come up to our panelists afterwards if you still have lingering questions. Thank you.
Thank you.